The first time Private First Class Lena Torres stepped onto the sand pit at Camp Pendleton, I turned her way. Not because she looked imposing. She didn't. At 5'4", with wiry arms and a face still carrying the softness of her 21 years, she looked out of place among the hulking Marines who filled the field. But she carried herself with a steady calm. Her boots hit the ground evenly. Her shoulders didn't slump. She moved with the quiet certainty of someone who had made a choice she wasn't going to turn back from. The whispers started immediately. "Who let the Girl Scouts in?" one of the corporals muttered. "She's in a break in half the first time we spar. I'll give her 2 minutes before she taps." They didn't bother lowering their voices. In their world, where muscle mass, loud voices, and bravado dictated rank long before actual stripes did, Lena was already dismissed. The drill instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Harlow, barked for silence. Today's hand-to-hand. No pads. No excuses. No mercy. You want to prove you belong here? The pit's where you do it. Pairs began forming, some eager, some nervous. Lena waited, knowing full well no one was going to ask her partner up. She watched as the groups squared off, large men grappling, the thud of bodies hitting sand echoing across the yard. Finally, Harlow's voice cut the air. "Torres, you don't get to stand there. Pick someone, or I'll pick for you." Before Lena could speak, a stocky Marine with a crooked grin stepped forward. His name was Kincaid, already infamous in the barracks for making bets on how fast the women would wash out. "I'll take the lady," he drawled. The men around him laughed, as if he'd just volunteered for comic relief. Lena stepped into the circle. Her heart pounded, but her face gave nothing away. "Ready," Harlow barked. "Go." Kincaid lunged, reaching to grab her shoulder in a move that was more playground shove than Marine technique. That was his first mistake. Lena pivoted, hooked his wrist, and used his momentum. A flash of movement, and suddenly Kincaid was face down in the sand, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle. He shouted, trying to buck her off, but she pressed his shoulder with the precision of someone who had drilled this move thousands of times. The yard went silent. "Break his arm, Torres, or let him up," Harlow ordered, testing her. Lena released him. Kincaid scrambled to his feet, red-faced. "Cheap shot." He spat, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "You want cheap?" Harlow barked. "Then do it again." 5 more Marines. "Line up." They did, eager to prove she had just gotten lucky. One by one they came at her, big, confident, swinging too wide, too hard. One by one they fell. A trip here, a chokehold there, a sudden shift of balance that landed them in the dirt with Lena standing over them. By the time the 6th Marine went down, the yard wasn't laughing anymore. Harlow's expression hadn't changed, but his eyes held something new. Interest. "Where the hell did you learn that, Torres?" "Judo, sir," she said, voice steady. "My father taught me since I was 7. The men around her, still brushing sand off their uniforms, stared in disbelief. She wasn't grinning, wasn't smug. She simply stood ready for the next order, breathing evenly, as though she hadn't just flipped half the pit on their backs. The mockery hadn't stopped. Not yet. But for the first time, the laughter had been replaced by something sharper, wariness. Because Lena Torres had just made it clear, she wasn't going to be their joke. She was going to be their problem. The barracks that night buzzed with tension. Marines were loud by nature, but the laughter that usually filled the bunks after training was different now. It was edged, uncertain. 6 guys. No way that was skill. They were holding back, someone muttered. "She got lucky," another said. "She won't last when it's real." Lena sat on her bunk, untying her boots with slow precision. She'd heard every word, but she didn't bite back. She never did. Her silence unnerved them more than any insult could. But not all of them dismissed her. Corporal Avery, a wiry Marine with sharp eyes, leaned against the bunk beside her. "They're pissed because you embarrassed them in front of Harlow. You got their attention now. Don't waste it." Lena looked up at him. Avery wasn't a friend, yet, but he was one of the few who didn't treat her like a liability. "They think I don't belong," Lena said quietly. Avery smirked. They thought that before you dropped them in the dirt. Now, they're scared you might prove it again. The days that followed were worse. Where before there had been laughter, now there was hostility. In the chow hall, trays accidentally bumped into her. In the gym, weight bars were left deliberately unracked, as though daring her to fail. One evening, during a long-distance run, Kincaid sprinted up beside her. His voice was low, bitter. "You made me look weak. That won't happen again." Lena didn't answer. She kept her pace steady, her breaths controlled. When they reached the hill, Kincaid shoved her shoulder hard enough to nearly send her rolling. She caught herself, stumbled, and kept running. Harlow saw it happen. He didn't intervene. He just watched. Later, as Lena laced her boots for night watch, Harlow appeared in the doorway. "Torres," he said. His voice carried no softness. "You think you've proved something, but flipping Marines in drills is nothing. Combat's different. Fear's different. Men who don't want you here, that's different. If you want to survive, you better be ready to bleed for it." She met his eyes. "I already am." For a moment, he studied her, the faintest glimmer of something, respect, maybe, crossing his face. Then it was gone. The ambush would come sooner than she thought. A training exercise, they said. Simulated combat in the scrublands outside base. Blanks in the rifles, mock grenades, hostile squads waiting in ambush. But exercises had a way of becoming something more when grudges were involved. And Lena Torres was about to find out just how far some Marines would go to push back against the woman who had humiliated them. The convoy rumbled out before dawn, headlights cutting through mist that clung to the California scrublands. Lena sat in the back of Humvee, rifle across her lap, helmet chin straps snug too tight. The other Marines shifted around her, some laughing, some chewing gum, some casting her sidelong glances that dripped with hostility. This wasn't just training, it was theater. Everyone knew it. The exercise was supposed to simulate real combat. Squads breaking off into the brush, ambushes staged, and objectives captured. But Lena felt the undercurrent humming through the men around her. They weren't planning to just follow the rules. Avery sat across from her, arms crossed. "Keep your head low," he said quietly. "They'll come for you." She gave a small nod. She didn't need to be warned. The pit fights had already painted a target on her back. The Humvee jolted to a stop. "Dismount," barked the sergeant. Boots hit dirt, weapons slung. The scrublands spread before them. Rolling hills dotted with thorn bush, dry gullies, and patches of wild grass. Their squad split into two fire teams, one to flank, the other to advance. Lena was pushed into the advance group. Kincaid was there too, his grin tight, eyes narrowed. He didn't say a word, but his presence was enough. They moved in staggered lines, scanning the brush for signs of the enemy. Birds scattered overhead. The sun broke through the fog, beating down hot. Sweat trickled under Lena's collar, but her breathing stayed measured. Minutes stretched. The silence grew heavier. Then crack. Blank rounds snapped through the air. "Contact front," someone shouted. The squad hit the dirt, rifles raised. Puffs of smoke rose from behind scrub brush where the opposing squad was staged. The firefight began, blanks snapping, shouts filling the air. Torres flank left. Kincaid barked. He wasn't her superior, but his voice carried the kind of weight that dared her to refuse. She moved. Crouching low, she sprinted toward a gully. She heard footsteps behind her, too many. She glanced back. Kincaid and two others had peeled off with her. Their eyes weren't on the enemy. They were on her. Her stomach tightened. "Take cover." Kincaid barked again. She slid down into the gully. Sand and dry grass scraped her arms as she landed. She looked up just in time to see Kincaid raise his rifle. Not at the enemy. At her. It was loaded with blanks, but blanks could still burn skin, still cause injury if fired at point-blank range. "You think you're one of us?" Kincaid snarled. His finger tightened on the trigger. Before he could fire, Lena rolled sideways, fast. Sand sprayed. She kicked upward, catching his rifle barrel and knocking it high. The blank went off, the noise thunderous, smoke rising. The other two Marines rushed her. One tried to grab her shoulder, the other went low. She dropped her rifle, pivoted, and used their momentum, slamming one into the dirt with a hip throw. The other lunged, but she caught his wrist, twisted, and yanked. He yelped as he collapsed to his knees. Kincaid came at her again, furious. She braced, ducked, and drove her elbow into his ribs. He wheezed, doubling over. She swept his legs, and he hit the dirt hard. The fight wasn't part of the exercise anymore. It was real. Voices shouted from the ridge above. The rest of the squad had noticed the scuffle. Avery was there, sliding down the gully wall, weapon raised. Not at her, but at the men. "What the hell are you doing?" Avery roared. Kincaid spat sand. "She's a liability. We were showing her where she belongs." Avery's jaw clenched. "Where she belongs is standing after you all tried to take her out." He extended a hand to Lena. She didn't take it. She pushed herself up on her own, dusting off her sleeves. The drill ended an hour later, but the tension didn't. Back at base, Harlow's eyes locked on Lena as the squad reported in. His face betrayed nothing, but his gaze lingered. Something had shifted out there. She had faced down more than just an ambush. She had faced betrayal, and she hadn't folded. Night fell heavy over the base. The barracks hummed with uneasy silence. Marines avoided Lena's gaze now, not because they dismissed her, but because they didn't know how to treat her anymore. She had refused to break when they tried to crush her. That unsettled them more than her victories in the pit ever had. In the mess hall, trays clattered, voices murmured. Kincaid sat at the far end, his side bruised, his pride broken, but his glare unrelenting. His friends muttered, glancing her way. It wasn't over. Not for them. Lena ate slowly, methodically. Every movement was deliberate. She knew the eyes on her, felt the weight of their judgment. But she wouldn't rush, wouldn't shrink. Avery slid into the seat across from her. "They won't stop," he said simply. "I know. They'll push harder next time. Maybe not in training. Maybe outside it." Lena's fork paused midair. "Then I'll be ready." Avery leaned forward. "You don't have to take this on alone. You've proved yourself. Harlow saw it. I saw it. Some of them did too. But if you fight everyone at once, you'll burn out." She met his eyes. "I didn't come here to make friends. I came here to serve." For a moment, Avery studied her, then nodded. "Fair. But remember, service doesn't mean silence." The following week brought new drills, urban training scenarios, mock house clearings, and long days under the relentless sun. Lena moved through each one with quiet focus, her precision undeniable. While others barked, boasted, or fumbled, she was steady, controlled. Harlow noticed. He said nothing, but he paired her with different Marines each time. At first, they grumbled. Then, grudgingly, they stopped, because working with her meant success. Until one exercise, the squad was ordered to clear a mock village, plywood shacks, and alleyways built in the desert for simulations. The enemy was another squad armed with blanks. As they advanced, Lena was on point, her eyes sharp, footsteps light. A door burst open ahead, an enemy Marine firing. She dove, rolled, and returned fire with precision, tagging him out. "Move, move!" she shouted, her voice sharper than usual. The squad followed her lead. House by house, alley by alley, they cleared. Her commands were simple, efficient. "Cover here. Push there. Breach now." By the end, the squad had taken minimal casualties. They'd completed the objective faster than any other team that day. When the sergeant called the exercise, Avery clapped her on the shoulder. "That's leadership," he said, but not everyone agreed. Back at the barracks, Kincaid's voice rang out. "She thinks she's in charge now. What's next? She takes the platoon." The words stung more than the shove on the hill had. Not because they hurt her, but because they revealed the truth. No matter how much she proved herself, some would always see her as an outsider. That night, lying in her bunk, Lena stared at the ceiling. Her body ached. bruises blooming across her arms. But her mind was sharp, restless. She hadn't come here to be liked. She hadn't come here to be tolerated. She had come to be a Marine. If they were going to keep testing her, she would make sure she passed every test. And when the time came, when the field demanded more than drills and exercises, she would show them. Not with words, not with defiance, but with results. The line had been drawn, and Lena Torres was ready to step over it. The desert wind had a way of cutting straight through fatigues. Lena Torres stood on the tarmac, helmet tucked under her arm, waiting with the others as the transport aircraft roared in. This wasn't training anymore. No pit fights, no plywood villages. The orders were clear. Deployment to a forward operating base in an unstable region where insurgents have been pushing harder each week. For some, it was their first time beyond American soil. For Lena, it was the moment she'd been bracing for since day one. Training could be manipulated, rules could be twisted, but combat was raw and unforgiving. It would show the truth, whether they liked it or not. She climbed into the transport, the vibration rattling her bones. Avery sat across from her again, his jaw set in quiet resolve. "You ready?" he asked over the noise. She met his eyes. "I was born ready for this part." But not everyone shared her calm. Kincaid sat further down the row, his stare heavy with resentment. The air between them was taut with unfinished business. He muttered to the Marine next to him, loud enough for Lena to catch. "First sign of trouble, she'll fold." She didn't react. Not yet. The flight carried them into the unknown, and when they touched down, the heat hit like a wall. The forward operating base was dust, concrete, and barbed wire. Beyond the walls lay rolling hills of scrubland, villages scattered like shadows, and the threat of ambush in every patch of rock. Their first task was simple: patrol the outskirts, secure a supply route that had been harassed for weeks. Simple, but dangerous. The squad loaded into Humvees, the engines growling, tires spitting sand. Lena was posted as rear security, her rifle cradled against her chest, scanning the road that stretched behind them. The chatter in the vehicle was subdued. They all knew patrols were where things went wrong. Hours passed with nothing but dust, sweat, and the crunch of tires on gravel. The sun sank low, painting the world gold. Then it happened. The lead Humvee jolted, smoke erupting from beneath it. A thunderclap of sound split the air, and ID. "Contact left," someone screamed. The world exploded in gunfire. Muzzle flashes sparked from the hillsides. Bullets whined, snapping past the convoy. Lena's training clicked in. She swung her rifle, eyes scanning, finger steady. 3 silhouettes moved against the ridge. She fired controlled bursts. One dropped. The others scattered. "Kincaid, move up," the squad leader barked. But Kincaid froze, eyes wide, body pressed against the Humvee. He wasn't moving. Lena didn't hesitate. She vaulted from cover, sprinted across the dirt, and laid down fire to cover the exposed squad members. The weight of the rifle was familiar, the recoil steady against her shoulder. "Push forward," she yelled. Her voice cut through the chaos like steel. Marines scrambled, emboldened by her charge. Avery moved with her, laying suppressive fire, his shouts coordinating their movements. The firefight raged for what felt like forever, but could only have been minutes. Dust choked the air, sweat burned her eyes, and every muscle in her body screamed. But slowly, methodically, they pushed the insurgents back. When the last shots faded, silence pressed in like a heavy hand. The enemy had melted away into the hills. The squad regrouped, breathing hard, faces smeared with dirt and sweat. One Marine was wounded but alive, dragged to cover during the fight. Harlow's voice crackled over the radio. "Status." Avery answered, "Convoy intact. One casualty, stable. Enemy scattered." And then, silence, before he added, "Torres held the line." The words sank deep. They weren't just a statement. They were an acknowledgement. Lena stood still, chest heaving, rifle lowered. She didn't look at Kincaid. She didn't need to. The truth was written in the dirt and gun smoke. She hadn't folded. She had carried them. The firefight had shifted something in the squad. Where there had been whispers and sideways glances, there was now a quiet respect. Not universal, but enough to tilt the balance. Even Kincaid, though he said nothing, avoided direct eye contact. His silence was louder than his insults ever were. But Ward didn't wait for grudges to settle. Orders came down for a night raid. Intel suggested a weapons cache hidden in a cluster of mud brick buildings 2 miles from the base. The squad was tasked to secure it before it could be moved. The briefing was terse. Satellite images showed narrow alleys, rooftops close enough for crossfire, and only one road in or out. A trap waiting to spring. At dusk, the squad moved out, rifles checked, night vision goggles ready. The desert cooled, wind whispering through scrub. Every step felt amplified in the silence. They reached the outskirts just as the moon rose. Shadows painted the walls in jagged shapes. "Stack up," the sergeant ordered. Lena took her place in the line, breath steady, hands calm. Avery gave her a nod, the unspoken signal of trust. The first building went down clean. Door kicked, rooms cleared, nothing inside but broken furniture. The second was the same. Then the third. As they breached, gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes flared from windows, bullets hammering the walls. The squad scattered, taking cover. Shouts echoed in the alley. Enemy contact. Lena pressed against a wall, heart pounding. Her night vision lit the chaos in green shadows. 2 insurgents moved down the alley toward her position. She didn't think. She acted. She stepped out, fired 2 precise shots, and they crumpled. Another emerged, weapon raised. She pivoted, rifle snapping again. Down. The squad pushed forward, clearing room after room. Every corner was a threat, every shadow alive. Then came the rooftop. Lena climbed the narrow stairs 2 at a time. Avery, right behind her. They emerged into open air just as an insurgent swung his rifle. The barrel glinted in the moonlight. Without hesitation, Lena lunged. She slammed into him, the rifle clattering across the rooftop. They struggled, fists and elbows in the dirt. His weight bore down, but she twisted, using leverage, not strength. She rolled, locked her arm around his throat, and held until he went limp. Breathing hard, she pushed him aside and stood, chest heaving. Avery was there, covering her, eyes wide with respect. "Clear," he called. By dawn, the weapons cache was secured. The squad gathered outside, faces drawn but alive. The sergeant gave a rare nod. "Good work, especially you, Torres." The words weren't flowery, but they carried weight. More than any insult, more than any glare. For the first time, Lena felt the shift not just in the squad, but in herself. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about surviving, about leading when no one else would, about doing the job when hesitation meant death. The night raid hadn't just been a mission. It had been a revelation. And for Lena Torres, it was only the beginning. The desert had a cruel way of wearing soldiers down. Days blurred together into monotony. Heat by day, cold by night, and the constant pressure of waiting for something to explode. For weeks, Lena's squad rotated through patrols, raids, and convoy escorts. They lost count of how many times they'd taken fire from unseen ridges, or how many nights they'd returned coated in dust and silence. But one mission would change everything. The orders came through on a sweltering afternoon. Insurgents were planning a coordinated strike on the forward operating base. Their task was to intercept a weapons convoy before it reached the enemy staging ground. If they failed, dozens of Marines at the base could be wiped out. Tension rippled through the squad. This wasn't routine. This wasn't a raid for a hidden cache. This was a make-or-break mission. They loaded into Humvees. Lena seated in the gunner's position this time, the .50 cal heavy beneath her grip. She scanned the horizon, the desert stretching endlessly in waves of heat. Convoys supposed to be coming through the canyon, Avery said, voice tight over the radio. "Which means ambush," Lena replied. Which means ambush, he echoed grimly. The canyon rose ahead, narrow walls of jagged stone. Perfect killing ground. Every instinct screamed at her, but there was no turning back. They rolled inside, engines echoing. For a moment, only silence. Then, the world erupted. A rocket-propelled grenade streaked down from the ridge, slamming into the lead Humvee. The explosion threw dust and shrapnel into the air. Gunfire erupted from both sides, a rain of bullets hammering their position. "Contact front and flanks," the sergeant shouted. Lena swung the heavy gun, the recoil shaking her bones as she unleashed a storm of fire. Rocks shattered under her rounds. Insurgents ducked for cover, but she held her ground, cutting off their advance. Avery's voice barked through the chaos. "We need to push through, or we're boxed in." But pushing through meant driving straight into more fire. Staying meant getting slaughtered. It was a no-win scenario. Lena made the call. "Suppress left ridge," she yelled, her voice carrying across the squad. "I'll clear the right." Without waiting for orders, she leapt down from the turret, hit the dirt, and sprinted toward the canyon wall. Bullets chewed into the ground at her heels. She threw herself into cover, breath ragged, rifle raised. Kincaid shouted after her, but his voice was lost in the chaos. She climbed, boots scrabbling against rock, muscles burning. Every second stretched into eternity. Above, an insurgent leaned over the ridge, rifle aimed down at her squad. Lena didn't hesitate. She fired once, twice. He crumpled. She reached the top, chest heaving, and swung her rifle across the ridge. 3 more insurgents turned, shock flashing in their eyes. She squeezed the trigger, her shots precise, controlled. 2 dropped. The third fired wildly, bullets grazing her arm, but she pressed forward and finished him. The right ridge went silent. Below, the squad pushed forward, seizing the opening. The Humvees roared through the canyon, gunners blazing, Marines shouting. By the time the shooting stopped, smoke and dust hung thick in the air. Bodies lay scattered across the ridges. The convoy, loaded with crates of rifles, explosives, and ammunition, was seized. They had stopped the strike. But victory came with a cost. Private Mitchell, the youngest in the squad, lay wounded near the blast site, shrapnel in his chest. Lena dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her hands to his wound. His eyes were wide, his breath shallow. "Stay with me," she said, voice fierce. Mitchell coughed, blood flecking his lips. Did we get them?" "We got them," she promised. He tried to smile, then went still. Silence. The squad stood around him, the weight of loss pressing heavy. Lena closed Mitchell's eyes with trembling fingers. This was the breaking point. Not because of the firefight, but because of what it cost. Training never prepared you for the moment someone didn't get back up. As they loaded back into the Humvees, the respect in the squad's eyes was different now. It wasn't just about Lena proving herself. It was about survival, about carrying each other through the fire. And deep down, Lena knew the war had only just begun. The Canyon mission had changed everything. Word of Lena's actions spread beyond the squad. Her climb up the ridge, her precision, her refusal to back down. For once, she wasn't the subject of laughter or doubt. She was the Marine who had turned the tide. But war doesn't reward heroes. It tests them again. Weeks later, as the base braced for another assault, Lena found herself on the wall at dawn, scanning the horizon through binoculars. The desert was quiet, almost too quiet. Then the first mortar fell. The base shook, alarms blaring. Dust filled the air as explosions hammered the perimeter. Insurgents swarmed from the hills, pouring toward the gates. "Positions," the sergeant roared. Lena sprinted to the front, heart pounding. The gate was their weak point. If it fell, the base would be overrun. She took position behind the sandbags, rifle steady. Avery was at her side, Kincaid too, their faces grim but resolute. The battle roared to life. Gunfire cracked, mortars thudded, the gate shuddered under the assault. Marines shouted, the world a blur of smoke and chaos. Lena's shots were steady, her voice cutting through the noise. Hold the line. Insurgents crashed against the gate like a tide. For every one that fell, two more surged forward. The hinges groaned, metal bending. Then, in the chaos, Kincaid was hit. He crumpled, clutching his side. For a heartbeat, Lena froze. The same Marine who had mocked her, doubted her, now lay bleeding at her feet. She didn't hesitate. She dragged him back behind cover, hands pressing to his wound. You're not dying on me, she growled. His eyes met hers, pain and something else, something like respect, flickering in them. Avery took her position, rifle blazing. Lena, the gate. She turned. The metal was giving way. One more push, and it would fall. Adrenaline surged through her. She grabbed the nearest launcher, hefted it onto her shoulder, and aimed at the densest cluster of insurgents. The rocket streaked out, slamming into the ground. The explosion tore through the enemy ranks, scattering them. For a brief moment, the assault faltered. Now, she shouted. The squad surged forward, pouring fire through the breach. The insurgents broke, retreating into the smoke. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of flames and the groans of the wounded. The gate still stood, battered but unbroken. The base was safe. As medics rushed in, Lena sat against the sandbags, rifle across her lap, exhaustion crashing over her. Avery crouched beside her, a rare smile tugging at his lips. You didn't just hold the line, he said quietly. You became it. For a moment, Lena closed her eyes. She thought of Mitchell, of every drill where she had been laughed at, of every doubt thrown her way. None of it mattered anymore. She wasn't just the Marine who had dropped 6 men in a training pit. She was a Marine who had stood when the gate nearly fell, who had led when hesitation meant death. And in the silence after the storm, she knew one truth. Respect wasn't given. It was earned in blood, in grit, in fire. And she had earned it.